Welcome to another great episode of I've Got a Theory. I'm your host, Henish. I'm joined by my guest, Peter Christian. Peter, thanks for joining me.
Thank you for having me, Henish. Appreciate it.
So you've got a long and colorful career, from being a former business executive to a consultant, adjunct professor, and author. And even though you're officially retired, you're still finding yourself busy with all this stuff.
That's correct. Yes, retirement is a very busy time of my life, for sure.
Well, awesome. Well, thank you for spending some time with us. I'm interested to hear your theory based on your years of experience in the consulting and business worlds, because it seems applicable. So let's hear it.
Okay. Well, I kind of developed this on my own, but I borrowed from other theories. And the one I probably borrowed most from was one called the boiled frog. If people aren't familiar with that, the theory goes that if you put a frog into a pot of room temperature water, it is fine. And if you slowly turn the temperature up so that the frog doesn't realize what's going on, it will continue to adapt to the change in its environment until finally you've got it at boiling and the frog gets boiled and dies. So in my business, dealing in consulting.
Have you ever done that in real life, Peter?
Excuse me?
Have you ever tried that in real life?
Have I ever done that? No, I've never boiled a frog.
Okay, just check it. I just
a lobster.
I'm assuming it's true, but I've never proven it.
Okay, just a lobster, and you're not supposed to boil them slowly. I found out you're supposed to do it once and done. And
you drop them in and let them scream a little bit.
That's it. Let them scream one bloody time and then be done with it. But in business practice, what I found is, particularly in working with clients on projects, there's something that's called scope creep. And scope creep is where either the client tends to want to add pieces to the work that you've already agreed upon. Of course, they don't want to change the time aspect, or they don't want to change the dollar amount. They just want to see if they can get a bit more out of you. If you take that in the opposite direction, what they could also do is they could try to get you to reduce your cost to some degree, or reduce the time that you've kind of agreed upon with them in order to get the project done. And just like with the boiled frog, they wouldn't do it in a very quick fashion so you realize what's happening and jump out of the pot, so to speak. They do it in a very subtle way. So let's say that you had a project that was going to go for 90 days. 90 days is a fairly decent amount of time. And the client comes and they say, we're really under a crunch here. If you could only knock a day off and get it done in 89 days, what's one day? That would be a big help to us. And of course, out of the goodness of your heart, you go, well, 1 out of 90 is not so bad. That's basically about 1% of the time, maybe a little bit more than that, but not a big deal. So yeah, I can sacrifice a day. So now you've agreed on 89 days. And a little bit later, the client comes and says, we're really under pressure. Gosh, if you could only move it up a little bit, if you could knock a day off. Now you've kind of remembered, maybe you forgot that you already agreed to knock a day off. So you knock another day off out of the goodness of your heart. And that happens a couple of times. And all of a sudden you realize, I just agreed to get this project done in 85 days, or maybe even if you were really kind of not paying attention, 80 days, and you were doing it one at a time. Or the same thing would be true if you had dollars involved, and you probably would have dollars involved. And they say to you, we agreed to do this for $1,000, but we're really stretched, and it would really help us a lot if you can knock $1 off. Well, what's $1 out of $1,000? It's not a lot. It's a lot less than 1%. So you say, sure. And again, if that happens, just like with the time aspect, after a period of time, if you agree to enough ones, it could wind up being a significant amount of dollars that are involved. And you did it out of the goodness of your heart, but you kind of got coerced into it a little bit. So I've come up with that theory of one, which is be aware when people start to one you to death. when they tell you that, and you agree that it's not such a big deal if you only do one little thing and maybe one little time, but when it happens over and over again, suddenly becomes a pretty big deal. So that's my theory of one. And in one of the books I wrote, I deal about 3 laws that I've used in my business career that I've learned over time. And that's one of the important ones, is my theory of one.
So let me ask you, Peter, do clients do that aware? Are they aware of what they're doing, or are they just kind of thinking that they're just asking, hey, you never, if you don't ask for a discount, you won't get it type thing?
I think it's a little of each. I mean, some won't. A lot of people are very good. They want to be fair with you. Okay. You've agreed upon a price, you've agreed upon a time frame, you've agreed upon what the scope of work is going to be, and they're satisfied with that. The negotiations all occurred up front, and you agreed on it, you move forward. Others, it depends. Either they really do have an issue, and some of them do. I mean, companies are struggling, particularly nowadays with everything that's going on. So they're trying to do the best they can for themselves. So they may be doing consciously or even unconsciously. They're really feeling the stress and the strain, and they figure, hey, if I can just get a little bit more, that helps me out quite a bit. And I try to be cognizant of that with companies, even when putting together proposals that have time frames and costs and so forth. There are times I'll cut the smaller guy a break as far as costs, as opposed to somebody who's larger and has deeper pockets, because you want to do the work for them, and you want to make sure you do a good job, and you're trying to be fair, and you know that they're stressed a little bit and strained a little bit, and if you can help them out, so much the better.
So
But
let me pitch a real life situation to you, and you tell me your analysis of
sure.
it. So we've been working with this clients for the last few months, and I own a real estate and construction companies, if you didn't know.
Okay.
So very few real estate and construction companies here in San Diego. So we met the client. He wanted to buy a property that his aunt inherited from her mom. So the house is in bad condition, needs a lot of work. So came to the right company. We can help him make that transaction happen from his aunt to him, purchase it, help arrange the mortgage, and then hire my construction company, a separate entity, to do the remodel. Right. So initially he had agreed, and the seller had agreed to 4% fees. And come to find out that he wanted to pay 2%. The seller wanted to pay 2% because he's military. He's going to use VA financing. And then the VA is like, hey, you can't pay commissions technically. No problem. This is just a matter of moving some money to column A to column B. Everyone nets the same amount. Everyone gets the same amount. You just give a little bit more to the seller. They pay 4% instead of you paying 2 and 2. And he got hot and heavy, yelling, screaming, cursing that nope, it's his benefits as a VA buyer and his military service that he should only pay the 2%. And that was what it was agreed. You know, that's what's fair per the guidelines. We're like, I don't think you understand. It's just a regular guideline that sellers always pay the commission and buyers rarely do. But in this case, you wanted it that way. So we tried, and they said, no, you can't do it. We still are entitled to the 4%. And he stomping his feet and hooting and hollering. And at this point, I'm like, this guy's a wild card. I can't work with him because obviously he doesn't understand logic, right? And now I don't want my construction team to take on the project either. So the seller, his aunt, was a little bit more reasonable. And, he was even backing out on paying fees that he agreed to pay for her for escrow and title and things like that. So being problematic with his own family as well, right? And so now he's willing to blow this deal up. Meanwhile, I've got an ace in the hole because as a backup plan, I'm willing to buy the property, right? So I tell the seller that I'm like, hey, I'll give you the same terms. I'll buy it. No problem. But, she wants to try to keep it in the family. He comes to his senses and they finally agree. And unbeknownst to me, I wouldn't have budged a bit. But one of my agents that was coordinating the deal agreed to a 0.5% commission drop. So from 4% to 3.5%, which I really disliked. But it's getting the deal done potentially. But then last night, I don't know how it went yet. I have to check with my team. We had to call him to fire him from our construction side because we're like, I don't want to work with a guy like that, right? It's the benefit of being self-employed is that we get to choose our clients. And if you are that type of person that's not nice, I don't want to work with you.
Right.
So is that kind of the power of ones? You saw us get nickel and dimed on the fees, on the commission, and then during the construction, there was scope creep happening, right? He was like, "Oh, by the way, I want to move some walls," and I was like, "Well, that involves structural and engineers, and that's several $1,000s more. That's not like, oh, hang up a new towel bar. That's a move a wall, right? It's not a small thing." Um, and now concern is like he wanted us to do it without permits, and we typically don't do that unless it's like a purely cosmetic, we're just painting and putting in new floors type thing. But in this case, if we're moving walls and upgrading plumbing and stuff, and we don't want this guy throwing us under the bus because we didn't get permits. So, we're like, well, now we got to get permits but either way, we don't want the guy as a client because we could see him doing what you're talking about, power of ones. Oh, $4,000 for flooring. How about $3,999? $5,000 for paint. How about $4,999? And in each trade, he could try to knock $1 off. Sure. And then all of a sudden on the overall project, it goes from 100,000 to 95,000. And that 5,000 was all we were expecting to take so we can keep our lights on.
Sure. Yeah, it sounds like that went past the power of one. That went to the I'm going to try to force my way through to you, and through sure will get you to do stuff. I've seen that already.
He was trying to like muscle through it. He was basically being a bully, and I don't take kindly to bullies.
Yeah, theory of one is a very subtle thing. Okay, it's not as overt as what you just went through.
Okay,
but I've seen that other one too. I had one where I walked into the client and he had we hadn't signed the proposal yet, and he had already cut like $10,000 off of it, but didn't expect me to reduce the work that he had. And I said, sorry, no. And he kind of took back and looked at me and he said, well, what do you mean? And I said, the price is the price. I've already figured out, just like you did, what my profit's going to be from it, based on the cost and so forth. And I said, that's it. I always love that when they tell you to sharpen your pencil. I tell them my pencil's about as sharp as it's going to get because I've already taken all that stuff into account. Sometimes I'll even tell them I started up here and I worked my way down to there. So you've already gotten your break. I've negotiated it with myself. There's no more negotiation. So if you don't want to do it, because again, if you go into a situation where it's not fair, then you've got a bad taste in your mouth. You've got a bad feeling about the person that you're dealing with, just like you did with this person. And you really don't want to do the work. You say, as much as I would want to do the work, do I want to work with that person and have to deal with that stuff? And if they did it here, what else are they going to do throughout the project? I'm going to have this ongoing battle. I don't need to do that. I'll go find somebody else who I can work with, who is going to be fair to me just as I'm going to be fair to that person.
So I mean, what you're indicating is that the theory of ones is that it's kind of a red flag, right? If that's what's happening from step one of your project, the next 20 steps are going to be painful because that one might turn into 2 or 10.
Yeah. And it's funny, as kids, we grow up, and one of the first words we learn and use quite a bit, if you've had young kids or older kids now, is one of the first words is no. But yet, as we get older, we tend not to want to use that word too much for whatever reason. And I found that a lot of times you got to say no for a lot of different things, because you can personally get hurt or be left with a very bad feeling. And it shouldn't be that way. Business transactions shouldn't be. You're providing a value. You expect to get compensated for it. You know what kind of money you want to make. You're not trying to take somebody over the barrel or to make a gazillion dollars at their expense. But at the same token, then they've got to realize that, they've got to respect that and deal fairly with you as much as you're trying to deal fairly with them. When it doesn't work out that way, then there's a problem. There's a real problem. And there's times where I've walked away. I had one client who said to me, I almost didn't take you on. I said, I almost didn't take you as a client. And they were, again, shocked. And I just wanted to let them know it cuts both ways.
It does. You're right. And so it's interesting because, being in a construction company, I hold myself as a professional. I've got a master's degree. I've had executive positions. I've run companies of 175 people. People still kind of will sometimes treat us like a construction worker. They're like, I need you to be here at this time, and I need you to do all these things. And I was like, take a step back. This is an interview at this point. We have to make sure we're a good fit for each other. Sometimes I might not be a good fit for you, and sometimes you might not be a good fit for me. So let's learn about each other and see if this is going to work out. And it's interesting when I give that preface, people's tone changes entirely, right? And so I'll do a 30-minute consult with them, review their project. And then at the end, this is the key thing. They'll say to me, what do you think? Do you think would be a good fit for you? And they're like almost selling me on them as opposed to trying to command me and tell me what to do with my job.
It's amazing when you stand up for yourself how attitudes can change. When people try to run over you or bully you, to influence you unduly, because if it starts that way, it's not going to end. It's going to be that way throughout the duration of whatever time you're working with them. So you got to be really careful about that. Like you said, it can definitely be a red flag, because if it's happening now, right from the get-go, chances are good it's going to continue throughout the project. So the sooner you can put a stop to it, the sooner you can use that very powerful 2-letter word, no, all right, and explain to them why. And particularly in your industry, because you guys run tight margins. You're not making a gazillion dollars on your projects. I think the standard is what, about 10% of the cost of the project is profit?
Nationwide, the average is about 4% net profit. It's very thin.
Yeah. So, you lose 1%, that's a quarter of your profitability right there. And that's not fair to you. That's not fair to you at all. So,
yeah, so that's kind of how that works out. But yeah, so what would you say to our listeners? One, I'm assuming you would advise people that are on the side of the asker saying, hey, give me a dollar or a percent or a day off. What would you say to those people that are doing that strategy?
I would say that if you're caught in that, what you've got to do is you've got to be fairly open and honest with the person you're dealing with. Not to the degree that you have to tell them about what all your costs are and your profit and all that stuff, but just that you've worked it out, you've thought it through. This is the best you can do for them. Here's the value that they're going to get from it. They will be happy, and ultimately you're going to be happy. And if it doesn't work out that way, and again, I've written about that, picking the right people to work with, not just who work for you, but work with you, whether it's a client or somebody that you're going to get into a business relationship with. I'm sure you use subcontractors, and you have to be able to trust them too. Because if they're not trustworthy, that can cause all sorts of problems. All of a sudden they come up with, oh, I told you that it was going to cost X dollars and now it's going to cost Y dollars. No, sorry, we don't have that worked into our plan when we can afford that, and it's not going to come out of my pocket. So whatever we've agreed to, that's what you've got to deal with. Now, if there's some way to work around that where you can make some adjustments so that it doesn't become a big issue, that's fine. But it's a give and a take situation. Business is definitely a two-way street. I know I've heard that old saying about, excuse me, the customer is always right. I like to add to that, but they're not always sure that they know what they want and what they need. And you've got to provide that to them. And again, sometimes you got to be able to walk away from the deal.
Yeah, for sure.
It's not a good deal for you if you're going to get hurt. And also your reputation gets out there. Then they pass that along. They tell you one thing, but if you're really firm with them and if you play the game, then they'll come down and the word gets out. And then that becomes a very difficult thing as well.
Yeah, I had a friend in the industry call me this morning. He's like, "Oh, help! The city red tagged my properties. I was remodeling them to flip them. What do I do? They want to do full plans and stuff." And of course I know the solutions. I've been doing this long enough. I was like, "Hey, I know one guy that's in the city that specializes in this," and I was like, "But he's not cheap. Don't think he's affordable. Don't nickel and dime him. But he's going to get it done right for you. So if that's okay with you, I'll send you his information." And, it's tough because I'm Indian ethnically, and it's in our nature and our DNA to negotiate and haggle on prices, right? The joke is that Indians are so good at bargaining that we invented the zero. Right. And that's kind of the joke. I mean, that's the truth, is the Indians did invent the zero, but but
they use it quite a bit, right?
Yeah, for sure.
More than you would like.
Yeah. So, I mean, when it comes to that kind of stuff, I mean, you get what you pay for the most part. I mean, there are some people that I had several months ago, this guy approached me posturing as a successful real estate investor and flipper. And he's done hundreds of these things. And he proactively offered to offer me consulting, right? And check out these rates, Peter, because maybe you'll appreciate them. Maybe you're similar to your rates. I'm not sure, but I doubt it. He said he'd give me a 4-hour half-day consultation or an 8-hour full-day consultation. Take a guess at what his rates were for the 4 and the 8 hours.
$250 for the half and $350 for the full.
You're on the wrong scale. He wanted $50,000 for 4 hours.
Whoa.
And the discount for 8 hours is $90,000.
Whoa.
So come to find out, it didn't take too long to find out that he was effectively a con man.
Yeah, it's slightly higher than I charge.
Yeah.
Just
Okay.
slightly.
I thought for that rate, I'd get Tony Robbins. Shit.
My goodness. Tony and his family and his best friends.
No, when I looked into it, Tony Robbins actually charges $100,000 an hour.
Wow.
Yeah. So
Wow.
And he only sells it in $1 million increments. So you have to buy 10 hours with him, and he'll do 10 1-hour phone calls at a cost of $100,000 an hour.
Wow.
That's next level.
There's a reason Tony and I haven't done business lately. He's come a long way from where he started.
Yeah. So the 50,000 guy, it turns out that he owed a bunch of people money. His wife left him. She found out that she wasn't lying to her, et cetera, et cetera. It was all kinds of bad. And I was like, and I told him, I was like, hey, I don't think I'm at that level where I can, really pay $50,000 for a half day of consulting. He's like, oh, we make our own levels. And he was trying to give me some like limiting belief guru stuff.
My lawyer only charges me $450 an hour. I guess he's a bargain these days.
He's a bargain. Wow. Honestly, a good lawyer can be worth it, right? I mean, that's the fact. I mean, that's I heard a quote. Who's our mobster in Chicago? Al Capone.
Al Capone.
He was saying that a good lawyer can make as much money as 10 machine gunners.
Yeah. And do as much damage too.
Wow.
Well, Peter, $50,000. So I take it you turned down the consulting deal.
I still have that $50,000 in my bank, thankfully.
Okay, that's a good thing.
Yeah, and I don't know what this guy's doing, but
that's a whole different theory we'll have to talk about sometime.
Yeah,
the theory of greed.
The con man thing is really interesting because a lot of people do it. I mean, people get busted in San Diego just recently. A woman was found embezzling Ponzi scheming over $400 million. Right? It might have. I don't know if it made national news because Bernie Madoff stole billions, but
right,
400 million is nothing to scoff about. But I mean,
no.
The con and con man. You know what it stands for, Peter?
What?
Confidence.
Confidence.
It's a confidence man or woman, I suppose. They build your confidence and then they take your money.
Wow. Yes, indeed.
So, all right, to wrap up, theory of ones, anything further, any last insights, any last advice? The key purpose of my podcast has always been to expand awareness, spread awareness of an idea, have our listeners think, I've never thought of that.
I would say the final thought is that in all business transactions, what you're looking for is fairness on both sides. You're trying to be fair to the person that you're going to do business with, and in turn, you want that person or persons to be fair with you. When it's disturbed on either side, then it's not going to be a good relationship. Chances are good that the work that you do is not going to come out the way you wanted it to, one way or the other. Something's going to get missed, and there's going to be hard feelings. So if you can't establish that, and if you don't have that good sense to start with, then sometimes it's best to walk away from the deal, because you could get yourself into a world of hurt by continuing on with it. So it's very important for you to establish that and to make sure that you're okay with it before you get started, and then that you continue it, that you don't get lulled in, whether it's the boiled frog or the theory of one or whatever, where you slowly get taken in by somebody who seems sincere, and they may very well be sincere, but the end result is still the same. When you add it all up, if you're not happy with what the end results are, quite honestly, you have nobody to blame but yourself because you allowed it to happen. So just be aware of it. Yes, people have needs. You have needs too, and they have to be taken care of. And when push comes to shove, you've got to kind of look at yourself and yours first before you look at the other person's. Not saying that you're not taking it into account, but if you're not looking out for you, nobody else is going to look out for you either,
Yeah,
or
good
don't
advice.
expect them to.
Yeah, good advice. I mean, that's accurate, and it needs to be heeded because yeah, people are willing to discount themselves and their value. I remember a client had asked if I could sell their house, and it was a nice $2 million house, ocean views and
Hmm.
stuff. And I was going to do it fairly cheap. You know, I was like, hey, you know, my standard rate's 5%, 2.5 on each side. That's what's the industry rate. And he called me back. The seller called me back a day later and said, hey, this guy, you know, this agent kind of newer says he'll do it for 1% total. I'm like, listen, he's going to lose more money than you would spending to hire someone proper like me or someone else that's better at their job versus the commission you'll save on this thing. And sure
Yeah.
enough, you know, it didn't go as smoothly as I checked. You know, I followed up with him just to be polite. And he was like, yeah, can we hit some bumps and maybe it didn't go as well as planned. I was like, yeah, I probably could have squeezed an extra 50,000 out. That would have
Yeah.
been worth the extra 10 or 20,000 you would have paid me.
Yep.
But you know, people, hindsight's always 20/20, and people see a cheap bargain. They think that you know what other people do isn't that isn't that valuable, especially in the real estate business or construction. Like, oh, you don't need to make $40,000 on this transaction. I'm like, well, I'm making you 2 million.
Yeah.
Let's make sure that I'm protecting your asset properly and I'm giving it the attention that it requires.
Yes, absolutely.
So, Peter, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate you joining me on this. Folks, another great episode of I've Got a Theory. Please like, comment, subscribe, and we'll catch you next time.